Hi, I'm Lee Richter, and this is Win the Day with James Whittaker.
You're listening to Win the Day with James Whittaker.
What we do in life echoes in eternity.
Broadcasting from Los Angeles, California. Here's your host, James Whittaker.
Let's go!
Hey winners, welcome back to Win the Day. If this is your first time here, we sit down with some of the world's true change makers to give you all the tips, tools, and strategies to win the day every day. The quote for this episode comes from Edward de Bono and says, "It is better to have enough ideas for some of them to be wrong than to be always right by having no ideas at all." For more than 30 years, Lee Richter has been an expert in business, leadership, and innovation. She has built and sold several multi-million-dollar companies, leading to recognition as one of San Francisco's top women to watch. In her acclaimed TED Talk, Lee explores the intersection of technology and humanity and how artificial intelligence will reshape the world. Lee is also a #1 best-selling author, a member of the Forbes Business Council, and an expert in emerging technologies. On a personal note, Lee and I have known each other for many years. She's a big believer in your circle creating your future and is one of the most well-connected people I have ever met. She's been a mentor to me and is so generous with her expertise in helping the next generation. In this episode, we're going to talk about how to secure relationships that could transform your life, the best tips to grow your business, what emerging technologies you need to adopt right now, and how you can leave a legacy that counts. Before we begin, the right bit of inspiration can completely change the trajectory of someone's life. So if there's a friend or loved one out there who needs to hear this episode or could use some help to win the day, share it with them right now. All right, let's win the day with my good friend, Lee Richter. Lee, great to see you. Thanks so much for coming on the show.
I feel so honored to be here and so blessed. And, we just spent my birthday together, and I feel like this is part of my birthday celebration. So thank you.
The cherry on top of an amazing week, isn't it?
It is. And Disney tomorrow couldn't get better.
Perfect.
Right?
Yes, exactly. Well, to take us right back, who was the first person to believe in you?
Oh, wow. It's interesting. Of course, my parents had their moments. My mom had done some really incredible things with me as I was growing up. She put me in commercials. She had me do all these things where I did get to connect with people out in the world. And normally a 5- and 6-year-old is not connecting at that level, but she taught me early on, we're all just people. And so that was really valuable. But my first coach that believed in me was Lou Holtz. He was actually my coach when I was 21 years old. I started a job with Merrill Lynch, and they chose 50 of us to work with Lou Holtz. And he came in and he taught me many, many things. And I saw him a few years ago in Scottsdale. It was during a party with one of his best friends. And I will tell you, he's still the same, still has the same lessons, and remembered our classes. And I thought, how lucky I was to have that intersection so young.
Yeah.
One of the things he taught us the most was to rewire our brain around our relationship with money, that we have a relationship with money. And I look back now and I see those lessons I learned at 21 changed the trajectory of my life. And I think every student at 21 should actually go in and learn how to let go of all their family's stories around money, because supposedly it goes back maybe 8 generations. And so we have grandparents, great-grandparents, other people in our lineage that might be affecting our present, that if we let go of it, we don't have to have it in our daily life anymore. So I'm very grateful for Lou Holtz. And nobody's asked me that question in a very long time. So it makes me revisit that thought. So thank you. I'm definitely in gratitude for him.
Yeah. And you're doing great things with your daughter, Abby, too. Is she 19 or 20 now?
She just turned 20 in July.
Just turned 20. And she was a best-selling author at 9 years old, if memory serves me correctly.
It's true. Our friend Mike Koenigs, He is a good friend of mine, and he taught us how to do a product that he called Make It, Market, Launch It. And she was writing books. She was in entrepreneur camp at Stanford. I did put her in the camp. That's good. But everyone thinks that I made her do the books. I had nothing to do with it. It was her and her peers. And what happened was she wrote these stories about pets that had been adopted. And they were phenomenal. And Michael's like, hey, you know what? Let's take those stories and see what we can do with it. And then he started telling people, if this 9.5-year-old could be a best-selling author, what's your excuse? And all of a sudden, she became not only valuable to the community, but also for other kids her age, and eventually even did a TEDx talk about it in Berkeley, California, on how to tell your story.
So cool.
And so it had many, many layers to it. But the first day, you can't imagine it. But 1 year later, she had 4 books written. and then 4 books published. And it just created momentum for her. So I'm really glad she learned how to do that. And now as an adult, she's actually using those skills over and over again.
You know, I recently spoke at my old university where I did my MBA, and one of the big themes of that commencement speech was that you need to surround yourself with people who see the world without limits and who back themselves to win. And it sounds like, if nothing else, even if not so directly, but I'm sure her just absorbing your energy and being so closely in your orbit, that she is someone who sees the world without limits because of the example that you have set for her and obviously the networks that you've been able to provide for her.
Thank you for that. And I like looking at it that way. And I've also had people, including really famous coaches, sit down with her and I, and then ask her, well, how's it feel having such a high functioning mom? Is it intimidating? I'm like, why are you planting the seed of it being intimidating? How about inspiring? And so we have to be really careful who we surround ourselves with, because some people want to lift us and see everything good. And some people might want to dim our light so they're more comfortable. And so along the way, we've had conversations about that as well. Who are the ones that want to lift us? Continue those circles, and nourish those relationships. And if you feel like someone's dimming your light, which even at 9, 10, and 11, kids at school started treating her different when she was on the news or she was in American Girl magazine, and she was in 5th grade. And some of the kids loved it. Oh, my best friend's in the magazine. And some were like, who do you think you are? And so she learned at an early age, who's in my camp? Who do I have to convince? And if I have to convince you, it's probably not a good idea. But if you're there naturally and you support me, then I want to be with you all day long. So it was a good learning lesson of who supports us and who doesn't along the way as well.
Yeah, achieving public success is a very quick way to find out who your real friends are.
It's true. And, you know, it's funny because when she had published that 4th book and she was in the news, Ellen DeGeneres and her team had called her and asked her to be on the show. And because of those experiences of being treated differently, she actually said no. And when Ellen asked her, she's like, are you kidding? I make dreams come true. You would think that you would want to be. And when the team was asking her, like, hey, if you met one of your movie stars or something like that, would that entice you to come? And her response, but she doesn't really remember this, but I do clearly, her response in that moment was, I don't want to be different than the rest of the kids. And so I honored that. I said, okay, I understand this is your choice. But the next day I had a conversation with her and I said, Abby, I just want to let you know this invitation was not really about you. It was really about the people you could inspire. And so the next time someone asks you something, rather than just saying no quickly, how about if you say, can I have 24 hours to think about it? Let your REM sleep come in, let your advisors, mentors, mom, whomever come in and give you some ideas of what's good about it and what's bad about it. Because maybe at the end, if you knew you were going to inspire other people to tell their story, rather than it be about you and being different than the kids, now you have a different perspective. And of course, that next day, she's like, you're right. I could have inspired all my friends and stuff to tell their story. So she ended up saying yes to the TEDx talk, luckily. But she did miss that opportunity, you know, to have that connection with Ellen and maybe say something that another kid might have learned, or she might have made a different connection.
Yeah.
But I think having that choice of saying no and the next day having a debrief gave her an opportunity to know for the rest of her life to take a little time before she makes this such a quick decision. Yeah. Even if she knows it's yes or no, like just take a little time and think about it, because you might have someone like you come in and say, wait, what about this? And change everything, right?
Yeah. Jim Rohn, who I still listen to a lot, you know, an American personal development icon, he talks about this idea of opportunity seize it quickly. And it's so interesting. Like sometimes just being able to say, cool, give me 24 hours to gather the right people around you to be able to come up with the right answer for you in that moment, rather than acting on emotion without full context that other people can provide for you.
Absolutely. And when you think about your REM sleep, when you're going to sleep that night, it's going in as a filing system and it's looking for things that here's proof that we've been here before, or here's proof this could be good for you, or here's your instinct saying maybe not do it. And I think when we give an opportunity for it to actually go into our subconscious, file in the system, come out, the next morning we do have a different perspective a lot. And I've seen that with couples too. They might have an argument, they might have something on one night, and the next day they're like, well, now that I slept on it, I feel a little different. And a lot of times it's just us proving something right or wrong.
Yeah.
And it's inside us already. We don't always have to go outside for the answer, but we just have to be still enough to hear it inside.
As someone who sees the world without limits now, what were some of the limiting beliefs you had to let go of along the way?
So many. And I still do. And I will say in this moment, it's still a practice because things will come in and then I get to, decide how I want to react to it, right? Or how I want to respond to it. And I think along the way, The who do you think you are was one that my mom sometimes did say to me every once in a while, especially when I was like working in the Twin Towers and exposed to some of the things. I guess, you could get a little caught up into it, and she'd be like, bring me down to size. The other one she said sometimes, which I did not like very much, was get your head out of the clouds, because she thought I thought too big or too wild. But I think by the time I was in my 20s, she saw it pay off.
So you're using those examples of bad programming from your
my own
that you had to
family that I had to overcome.
Yeah.
And that's partly what I did with Lou Holtz. One of the things he did was have us put all our family stories in, and then one by one, we redesigned them for more, not always positive, it's for a more powerful outcome. I think people think positive and negative, but it doesn't always have to be positive. It could be get rid of the negative. I agree with that 100%, because that does not serve us. And when a negative thought comes in, what I do is I say, well, that's not what I really want. How do I convert it to what I do want? So simple as I could say, I don't want to be late, but what I really want to do is be on time. So rather than say, hey, let's go, I don't want to be late, I will transfer that thought and then speak into, hey, let's go. I really want to be on time. And that changes the whole trajectory of our trip, because now we're focused on being on time instead of stressed trying to not be late.
Yeah, remove so much conflict from the situation.
It's so simple. Another one, I own veterinary hospitals, and I would hear clients, say, I told the kid to leave the door closed because I didn't want the dog to get out and hit by a car. Sure enough, it gets hit by a car and they're in the vet hospital. What did they really want? Son, can you please leave the door closed because I want the dog to stay inside and safe? So if you convert it to what you really want, now you're planting the seed. Hey, honey, we want to keep the dog safe. Now we're working towards what we really want. But instead, the fear comes in. I don't want the dog to get hit by a car. That happens all the time. And I hear the mom say, I told you not to do that. I'm like, oh, next time just say, keep the dog inside and safe. And I think you guys will have a better experience. And I take that teaching moment as much as I can, but I have to ask permission for it. They have to be ready for it. And I'm glad that I was ready for it along the way. And at 21, I was still too old to be ready for it, but I was old enough to know to apply it. And so I'm grateful I had that lesson early.
And how smooth was your transition to the world of entrepreneurship?
Well, I worked at Merrill Lynch for, I was a stockbroker, Series 7, Series 63, went and got my CFP license. And all of that was with Merrill and in the stock market, right? That was 14 years of my career. And what I did was I learned the basis of finance. How does finance work? How does the luxury of the deal, the art of the deal, the connecting with people? Not everything is done on the golf course, but why is it done on the golf course and where else can you do it? And I worked at Merrill in Washington, D.C., and it was really a fabulous experience, but it was big education. So in my office was 103 brokers, 3 are women. And by the way, my name is Linda Lee. And at that moment, I started going by L.Lee. Because then they assumed I was a man. I'd get a whole bunch of new clients and then kind of surprise them when they came in. But along the way, what I learned is everyone's an entrepreneur, even in the market. You have your own business, you have your own clients, you have your own book. And so I built that and I learned the skills. And then I learned I really wanted to run my own companies. And so my husband graduating from veterinary school, the plan was always to build an empire around him and the pet industry. And so we moved to the San Francisco Bay Area. He worked as a veterinarian a couple years. And then when the timing was right, we bought a vet hospital. I borrowed my first $1 million, which I will say, women, you can actually borrow money. You can, because I did then. And that was 25 years ago. So you just have to be really creative. And I love mentoring women on how to have access to things that they in their mind think they don't. Because in my mind, I say I always do. Even in that room of 103 brokers, I didn't see myself different than anyone else. I knew the client did, but I saw myself as the same thoroughbred as everyone else. And I think one of my mentors is Dan Sullivan. And one of the things he told me years ago, he put me in a group with 33 people. It was 31 men, like Gino Wickman, who wrote one of my favorite books of all time, Traction. People in there that I looked up to, but here we are in the same group. And I asked Dan, like, how did I make this group? Like, I'm looking around like, how did I get in here? And he goes, simple. You do not apologize for your ambition. And I was like, oh, well, what does that mean? Does that mean other women do? He goes, what I see is a lot of women have a built-in glass ceiling. They think it's out there, but it's really in here. And so because of Lou Holtz, because of my background, that glass ceiling was shattered. Didn't even think about the difference of having or not having. But now that I mentor so many women and know that style, I see they actually, a lot of them do have it. And he says the glass ceiling is built in to who is the most successful person in my family system. And then how can I be safe to break through that ceiling? So very few know how to right now, but I think this is one of the big teachings that we need to do is eliminate that glass ceiling, not have those limiting beliefs, and be as big and bright as possible. And I think that's part of my mission is really to empower other women and other people. It's people in general, but I see women need a little bit of an extra boost because we have been at a disadvantage. We've been at a disadvantage for access for funds, access for ideas, and access in the room, right? When I got in that room, it wasn't man and woman, male and female. What it really was is, are you a doer, a thinker, or a feeler, right? He taught us a system called PRINT, and he had us each do it. And what was interesting is, I believe it was 31 out of the 33 were doers, and 2 are doer feelers. I happen to be one of the doer feelers. I'm still a doer, getting things done. However, I do from the heart. And what happened was in that room, I started having breakouts with everyone. And I'm thinking they're wanting to work with me because of the female perspective. It's the female energy, but it's the heart connection. And so I think we're looking at male, female, but we're all male and female energy. We all have it, right? We have divine feminine inside all of us. We get to choose it. And one of the things I loved about your class and the group that you put together in the last couple of days is you had an expert in there on psychology. And she taught us when you're in a wounded masculine, one of the best places to go to get out is in the
Healthy feminine.
Healthy feminine. All of us have it. And when you start looking at her book and what she's doing, which I hope you put it in the notes, a link to her book because I'm already reading it. When you start seeing the crossover, it's fun. It's easy. It's way better. Why have an argument in a wounded place when you could actually be in a healthy place just by knowing the route to take, just by knowing the words to choose, the reaction to give, the blessing to bring to the other person. And I think when we're in that healthy state, we just have a much, much happier life. So once you know the script and once you know the formula, stay there.
Yeah, exactly. Once you can see that visual, it's so easy to identify, give yourself a bit of a self-diagnosis of what went wrong to be able to move you over.
And I wish I had that diagram and that 25 years ago, because it would have saved me some actual challenges along the way. And I could see things now. I want to go back and say, hey, I know I was in this space here. Can we convert it to this and have a different conversation? And I actually am repairing a couple relationships that maybe got a little static because a little wounded got in there. And I think it's really powerful. Yeah, it's what we choose, right? We get to choose.
Yeah. The book is Sovereign Love by Danae Logan. It's a great read. And Danae was a great podcast guest on the show as well. I think this is good timing to ask, just based on what you had mentioned there. You are so well connected with people like the established biggest players in the world of business, right through to sort of college students who are trying to make it. What do you see is so important? Like, what are the essential elements of the people who really make it in the world of business?
That is such a great question. And I'm so glad that I pay attention to people like Brene Brown, who told me what to look for. And the number one thing is gratitude. And I know everyone says it and everyone's like, oh, it sounds so trivial. It is not trivial. It is a frequency. And the minute I'm in gratitude, I can't be in anything else. I mean, even showing up here today and being so grateful to have this time with you, it's more than just this moment. It's this moment plus all the other moments. And I'm so grateful for it. And the other one is resiliency and just not giving up no matter what. And I actually had someone at my house recently and I was doing a project and we started at 8 a.m. and he actually showed up at 3 p.m. And at 11 o'clock at night, we were still doing it. And he's like, I'm out. And he's like, you should take some time the next couple of days. You don't need to do this. I'm like, you know what? I'm finishing this because tomorrow I'm getting on a plane to Maui and it's a different chapter. And if I don't finish it today, that's less time in Maui. So I was resilient enough to just be like, I'm getting this done and finished. But then once I got finished, I was free to do what I really wanted. And I will say, other people give up. They give up too early. I think we have an extra little bit of tank in there if we want to, if it's important to you. Now, for me in that moment, I didn't feel tired and worn out, but he did. And because he did, he wanted to put that on me.
So you were connected with the energy of the freedom you were about to have tomorrow.
Exactly.
And
that's where I
was. With the
was.
stress and frustration of the job today, which would then prolong it by having to come back tomorrow to do it.
Exactly. And he wanted to go like drink sangria. And I'm like, no, I want to finish the job, but I am resilient and I will find that extra space. I will find 2 more people to come help me to get it done. I'm not going to quit in the middle.
Yeah.
It's just not. Now, if it was like a long shot and it was not worth it, that's different. But in that moment, the prize was to be on the plane to Maui. That was important to me. And I would rather work till midnight and finish and still get on that plane. Whereas he would quit. And I'm like, that's what happens with a lot of people. They just say, I can just do it tomorrow. And I'm like, that's the difference between us. That's why I'm running multi-million-dollar companies and you're working for somebody else.
Yeah.
That's really the difference.
And what are you looking for in the characteristics of people who you let into your inner circle?
Ooh, that's such a great question. There are characteristics, and the first one is heartfelt. Like one of the reasons you and I became friends in the beginning, and you mentioned me as a mentor, the mentor is in parenting. That's where we connected first. The mentor is in relationships, right? We weren't even connecting on business. We weren't even talking about selling books. We were talking about the people we love. We were on a red carpet. And I'm like, oh, send this to your family because I know that's what's most important to you. And I think being interested, like, I just really love people. So like me learning about your family, meeting your wife to me is such a gift, right? And yeah, I think that's the journey, is just really loving people. I did speak at Harvard a few years ago, and the Dos Equis man, who's the most interesting man in the world, spoke right before me. My friend Alex Mendozian was there too. And we asked him, like, what is it that makes, people so attracted to you? And he's like, just be interested. That's all. Don't only be interesting, be interested. And I really take that to heart. And I think I do it naturally because I am curious and I love people. However, a lot of entrepreneurs are actually introverts, and that is not their natural style. And I think that's what happened in those rooms is the heart-based people. They want to learn that because they know it will be better for them, but it's just not natural. However, we can all learn it. And then you just look for the pieces that you're interested in. And now that frequency, you'll connect with others.
Yeah, and you can get people to open up so well, like in the right setting, like we experienced at the Win the Day Mastermind. You get people who are naturally very reserved, shy, quiet about who they are and where they want to go. When they're in a safe space around other high-level people, it just puts people on a level playing field where people feel so comfortable opening up, and you can see a lot of those breakthroughs and real transformations occur. And that's what all of us need. We need to be walking around as who we are rather than wearing this armor and trying to sell people on a story that we've told ourselves when we're not fooling anyone. I think that impacts your energy, which then impacts the relationship and the depth that you have in the relationships. Like you and I have such a depth to our relationship, just as we do with all the other people that we're connected with, because there isn't any of those things getting in the way. We're exactly who we are, and it's a great feeling.
It's just show up
just
who
fun.
I love you who you are, and no expectations and no judgment, zero judgment. I will say though, at your event was a clear example of the depth of safety, like you mentioned, but also building relationships. Because on day one, which was so generous of you, you had each member go up on the stage and have a stage moment to introduce why they're there, what they were doing. And there were a few shy people, and there were a few people that you didn't really understand what their story was. 2 days later, unbelievable, because each person got back up on stage and they were completely transformed. They knew who they were. They knew their story. Everyone they worked with poured into them, reflected back, because it was a safe space and you kept it to the perfect amount of people. We actually could know one another. And we talked about that today. Like so many people think, I want to put 100 people in the room. Well, we're part of another group that is 30 to 40 people all the time. And I mentioned to him years ago, my favorite groups are usually right around 33 to 40 people, which is what Dan started his with as well. But you had the magic of that and you capped it. I remember you calling me and saying, get in the room. And then I remember you calling and saying, there's one spot left. If you don't get this, you're not going to be in the room. And I'm like, I'm doing it. I'm flying there. I'll be there. And I know you were doing it from the heart because you knew in the moment, the people in there, we would connect so well. You designed it so beautifully. And the proof is in those videos at the end. People were transformed. And they were transformed in telling deep stories. They weren't telling surface stories. The day before, they were even surface with themselves. But look, after a couple lunches, a couple dinners, and a little bit of class together, I mean, we did have Mark Victor Hansen, which was super nice. We did have really great people pour into us. We didn't expect a psychologist to come and tune in, but when she did, that helped us create an even safer space because we understood ourselves better. So you as a leader really crafted that and really designed it. And I saw how much behind the scenes you cared about each person in the room. But at the end, I think those videos, if you did it before and after, even for them, they'd be like, how did I do that in 2 days?
Different people, right? Yeah.
But the safe space was the key. And you made it so that everyone in there was seen and heard. No matter what they said, they were in a cone of silence and they could be 100% authentic. And I think that was actually one of the things that our presenter said, it's Danae.
Yep.
This is one of the things she said is being authentic is like the most prize in any of your relationships. And you kept a space where we can all be authentic. So I'm grateful for you for that. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm grateful to have you there. And you are in more groups and masterminds and things than anyone else I ever know. And I've got 2 young kids, so it's harder for me to have the freedom to be able to get away. But I'm someone as well who just the power of being in the right room is just so incredible. We'll be back with the show shortly. I've got a quick question for you. Are you living up to your potential? It's a question that shapes your family, your business, and your overall happiness every single day. That's why I'm excited to introduce the Win the Day quiz. Head over to winthedayquiz.com right now, answer a few thought-provoking questions, and you'll instantly discover how well you're performing relative to your true potential. And here's the exciting part for our Win the Day family. As a fan of the show, you'll receive a personalized and absolutely free action plan to help you win the day every day. Now, just imagine how transformational the results will be when you consistently show up as the best version of yourself in every aspect of your life. Don't miss out. Take the Win the Day quiz now by visiting winthedayquiz.com or click the link in the show notes. All right, let's get back to the show. Can you talk a little bit about the power of the right room? And perhaps is there one example that you can think of being in a room or having a conversation with someone, how that has transformed your life or your career?
Yeah, we haven't even talked about this, but it's going on right this minute. And I'm so grateful you asked this question because it's making me think. Around 2015, I was in Scottsdale. I was with Joe Polish in the Genius Network. And a friend, Craig Clemens, and I were actually sharing dinner, talking about dogs, and we came up with an idea. And that idea now has spawned like 42 new products, some books, a whole bunch of things together. And we couldn't have seen it in 2015. We actually saw, let's make a product for our dogs to be healthy together. And now it's just turned into this little empire and beautiful things that we get to collaborate with Craig. And Craig is one of my favorite people on the planet and also one of the smartest. But I knew him when, and I'm watching him grow and just seeing behind the scenes. You know, number one, he's authentic. He's always in integrity. And I see behind the scenes, even with our brands, how much he cares. And it's inspiring to me. But now if I fast forward, this is now 10, 11 years later, one of the people that was at that dinner called me recently and asked me to do something extraordinary. And he said, I was at that dinner and saw you make that deal. And because you were in a mastermind, I want you to share that experience with other people, the power of a mastermind. But you know where we get the power of a mastermind, right? It's called Think and Grow Rich. Because the thing he says is have your desire, be clear with it. What are you giving in the world? And put yourself with a mastermind of people to do this. So right now I'm in a mastermind that's volunteer. Joe Stolte, who's a friend of mine in Austin, Texas, he's running it for the second time. We kind of do it all together. And we're just doing Think and Grow Rich, a chapter at a time. And it's brilliant. And it's a brilliant mastermind. Now, this is my 22nd time going through it with a group and learning it this way. It's my second time with Joe, and I love how he leads it. He empowers other people. But through doing it, we hear personal stories that then are so inspirational. And sometimes we hear learning lessons. But also, I think I put a 0 on one of my things, an extra 0, just by being inspired by the people in the group. And then it came true. So the power of the mastermind is being with like-minded people, being safe to celebrate, being safe to share your secrets, being safe to share what's not working and getting advice, being humble when things are so great, but bringing other people with you, shortening your learning curve. And the biggest thing is having access to the brains, the resources. There's people in those groups sometimes that will just tell me one resource that can change the trajectory of everything. One of them recently told me about a class action suit, which is a multiple 6-figure result for me that I might have missed. And I went back to my financial team and asked them, why didn't you tell me this? They're like, we didn't even know. But it was the power of the mastermind. So sometimes I'm in there and there might be 100 thoughts that come through in a day. Maybe only 2 or 3 are new ones for me. but it can change everything just by paying attention.
So many thoughts there. I think back at some of the things that I've done from some of the masterminds that you and I have attended together, and some of the things that I've written down in capital letters, things like take bigger risks and all of this stuff. Like sometimes just having one conversation just makes it all worthwhile. Of course, everyone leaves these events with pages and pages of notes, but the real benefit and result can come from just one conversation that might have changed your way of thinking. And
there's two things about that. May I share one?
Yeah, of course.
Number one, you might have pages and pages of notes, but what I've learned is I go to the very back page or in my iPad, I'll keep it on the back page of a notebook. I go on the very back page and start putting the ones I'm going to implement right away. So it stands out from the notes. I have other people, I do a lot in colors too, so I can see that too. Like green means go and red means stop and blue means like this is a blue ocean idea. So I have those things as well. But keeping that last page and just every once in a while going back and say, oh, follow up with this. Ooh, read this book. Now, when I get home, I could start there first. And the other thing I also learned from Dan Sullivan, but not from him, it was actually another participant in the mastermind. Sitting next to me at a breakfast, he had just gone over $1 billion for the first time in his company. And I asked him what his secret was. And this is, again, access before the meeting started, wasn't part of the topic. And he said, I did this thing. I hired a strategic assistant. And that assistant, the only thing they do is go over my notes with me when I come home. And they're the implementer of what I want to do. So they're basically the chief of staff telling the rest of the team what they need to do. But he has one person that only does his notes from his meetings. And the other thing I learned was when you're learning, the first day you write it down, which is why I use my iPad. I don't type things. I actually handwrite it, or I use a notebook. You write it down because it goes from your thumb to your brain different. Now it's going in there for your REM sleep, right? So 6 months from now, my REM is able to pull that out because it's in there. If I'm typing, it doesn't go in the same, but it does when I'm writing. So I learned when I was in college. Gary had 10 years of college, so we had a lot of lessons around learning things. And he was learning how to be a veterinarian. And he said, I need this for life, not just to pass the test. And so I started watching his skills. We asked some experts, and they mentioned the best for studying, first of all, is in 50-minute increments and a 10-minute break, 50 minutes, so you have some time. But also, the first day you write it, 24 hours later, you review it, and then 7 days later, you teach it to someone. So I've been doing that for years. I'll do it with one of my assistants. I'll do it with someone. I will read it. 24 hours later, when I'm at a meeting, I will read it. A lot of people, including you, will say, what are your takeaways? Part of the reason is so you go back and read your notes. It's such a gift. But the also 7 days later teaching someone, it instills it even more. So they say when you first do it, it's like you get 7%. When you read it the next day, you get 30%. But then you get 70% retention if you then teach it to someone 7 days later. So I started doing that because I want to be able to recall it myself. I might not need to know the exact information, but I will remember the date and I will remember where I was, and I can go back and retrieve those notes. So it's not only access to it, it's also being smart with how you put it in your brain and get it back out later when you need it.
Yeah, I love that example of the chief of staff being the implementer too. That's so good. And a lot of people are working in isolation or doing the same thing, thinking they're going to overtake the people who are at the top of their game just by being in isolation and working harder than they are. And it's just, there's no way that's going to happen. I love having opportunities to be able to pay a little bit of money as an investment rather than a fee to get in the room. Yes, to an investment in your relationships. Because once you have a friendship with someone, the answer is always yes if you ask it in the right way. And it's the right ask. Like you and I, as we do frequently, call each other and say, I need this, or can you help me with this? Or who do you know who can help me with this? And it's done because we're friends and we want to help each other succeed because we know each other so well. We have so many mutual friends. There's so many layers to the friendship, and all of that came because you and I ponied up some cash to be in the right room with a bunch of other people who we didn't know. And
the cash isn't the biggest part. It's the getting on the plane and going, because us being away from our family is even more, or even from our team or our environment. So that's a big vote. There's so many things to think about with this. And one of my quotes is, you cannot build an empire from your couch. You can't. In the beginning, when I was going out there and traveling, that's one of the things I would say to Gary. Well, I can't do the same thing unless I go meet people at the Genius Network and unless I go there. And when we had COVID and we had our Zoom meetings, it was nice, but it was not the same depth. We missed each other so much. The first time we all saw each other, it was huge. Like, oh my God, I just missed people, right? So The connection in person is so valuable. Connection matters more than anything. I mean, look at our technology. If you're not connected, it doesn't work, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Connection matters.
Yeah. And I look at the people that I invite into the top tier things that I'm doing. Like, I don't have a huge amount of free time at all, if any.
Your kids are little kindergartens the other day, right?
Yeah,
So.
that's right. So it's very difficult to make sure you're allocating your energy in the right way. It can be very difficult. So you've got to be very selective about the people that you let into your life, increasingly selective when you're in these really busy phases of life. The people that I care about are the ones who have integrity, they have big ambition, they've got a very big heart, and they just want to give and make the world a better place. And on the condition that they have those attributes, they're the people that I would happily love to mentor and put around the right people to be able to see them flourish, rather than focusing on people who are just far more advanced in their careers and are maybe looking at things like scaling and multiplying their efforts rather than kickstarting that impact. Is there anything that you think about how people who are more junior in their lives or their careers, what they can do to initiate relationships with some influential people, or just get a foot in the door to get in the right room to begin with?
Yeah. Actually, Madeline, who was in your group, she's in her 20s. We connected. I poured into her. I invited her to a gathering with people she didn't know, and she came. She came, she made the connections. She wrote a card for me saying thank you. And then the next morning sent me a text saying, I enjoyed meeting them. I learned this from this person. She actually told me the results, not just, it was nice. And I think, again, being interested, she was smart with the follow-up. Those are the people I pour into. It's almost like they qualify. When someone does something and then they follow up on it and they show their interest and they show they care and they show what they do there, they're doing with everything. So that's somebody I believe in her work from the beginning because I could see how she shows up. But I also saw how she lifted other people. And then when she came last night, most of the people there were like, 10, 20 years older there. She spoke with everyone. There was somebody there that might be working on the Olympic committee who's going to be here in Long Beach. And the first thing I'm like is, wait, you need to know Madeline because you want to hire her and all her friends to be part because I know they'll show up because she already has those things. But it comes from inside. I know she learned a lot from her parents. But even my daughter, I can't make her do things. It has to come from inside. And when it comes in, then we can nurture it. So I do see thoroughbreds, Dan Sullivan says with a man, you don't usually know if they're going to be the same as everyone else or different until they're 40. I can usually start seeing it when they're 30. And I've seen a few of them. But it is true. It takes a little time to get there. But once I see that, I want to like pour into them, give them resources, let them go because that's what they need. They need people who believe in them. They need people who can shorten their learning curve. And they need people who've already done it, who can say, hey, come with me. Let me show you how. But shortening their learning curve on what didn't work is the biggest value. One of the things I learned along the way is a formula called 1-3-1. When someone brings you a problem or a challenge, to have them bring you 3 solutions. And then I will pick the one, but I want to know what they pick so I hear their thinking. And then I'll pick the one and show my thinking. And now they understand how to make a decision. When you have these 3 choices, how do you narrow it down? And sometimes the first choice isn't the best choice. You might go to the second, but you also need to know when to abort the first and go to the second. It's not combine it. It's usually one, remove. And so once you learn that and you go through it, like I love seeing them go through it.
Yeah.
But the ones who tell me the follow-up, the ones who come back and say, here's what happened. Sometimes it's 6 months later. That thing you did this. Oh, I'll pour so much more into them.
It's great, isn't it? Yeah, it's a nice validation. Dan Martell shared something interesting similar to that when he was on the podcast. He spoke about not wanting to solve the problems that your team has. He said problems are puzzles and they need to be able to figure it out. And if you're too quick to solve their puzzle for them, you need to obviously train them and things at the start, of course. But if you're solving all of their problems and you're just teaching them to come to you whenever there's a problem and then all of the accumulation
and then I'm doing their
of stress.
job.
Yeah, exactly.
There's one other key thing that I learned along the way, and this was at Wharton School of Business way back in the day. It's just one little word that can change everything. In this case, one of the things that I ask people when they come to me with a problem, the first question, what have you done so far? What have you done so far? That means they have to do something, even if it's right their list of 3 ideas. They have to do something. So now you're training them to go fish, right? But the other thing I've learned with the team, when something's not going great, but yet they're doing their best. Instead of just saying, what can we do better, which makes them all feel like failures, one little word, what can we do even better? Just what can we do even better? It doesn't mean you suck. What it means is, I know you're doing your best, but what can we do even better? Let's look through that lens. Let's ask other people. Let's go to ChatGPT and see choices. Whatever it is, just like improve. I've learned even at hotels, when I check in, I'm like, well, that room's okay, but can you do even better? And I'm not telling you suck. I'm not telling you picked a bad room. I went and checked it out and I'm thinking, my experience probably could be better here. And almost always, they will look and find something. They just want to know that I went and did something on my own there, even check the room. If I ask them to upgrade me and I haven't even seen the room, they don't like that. I understand why they don't like that, because they're like, how do you know I didn't give you the best suite in the house?
Exactly. And you seem like an inauthentic person who does that to everyone as well, just trying to exploit people as you go about your day.
You're one of those at the counter. Exactly. But when you go to the room and you call down and you say, hey, I came here, I'm just wondering, could you do even better? Like, could I get a higher floor? They often will. They will often say, wow, I really appreciate that you actually went and looked at it before you begged me for something.
Yeah.
And I've talked to people because we have the Event Planners Association and we would do so many events and they would tell me their pet peeves. I'd say, what makes a good client? And they would tell me, this I like, this I don't like. And I heard that over and over again. Stop asking me for an upgrade. You're not the first. Give me an opportunity. To serve you.
Like a flight attendant, where, I feel like for 10 years, that was the thing. Everyone would hop on the plane and ask for an
I think they
upgrade.
just want to wear a card and answer the top 3 questions and just like, I don't have to say it anymore.
Yeah, that's right. A big priority for you at the moment is on legacy building. And I love this concept of yours about building and living a legacy while you're alive, rather than waiting for 20 years later to see what, if anything, unfolds as a result of what you've done in your time on Earth. Tell us a little bit about what it means to have a good legacy and how to lead that while you're still around.
Oh, wow. This is something that's actually coming up a lot lately. I remember when I turned 50 and I was like, wow, you know what? I built these legacies for all these other people. And one of them's my daughter who, since she was a teenager with books and TEDx, I'm like, wow, we're really building her legacy here. It helped her get in her college of her choice. I looked at it with Gary. I was like, wow, for 25 years, we've been building your legacy. With my PR and marketing clients, some of them, went from 0 to 25 million. Some of them went over 100 million. And a lot of it is just helping them build a legacy. And I realized I hadn't done it for myself. And I'm like, wow, I own a PR and marketing company. I should be doing this. And so I started paying attention, but it wasn't until my 50s that I started paying attention. And I realized we should be doing it while we're alive and enjoying building our legacy. And so by being in these groups of big thinkers, I started seeing what do I do that I think differently and wrote some patents. I have a really great patent attorney. I know everyone's going to want to write in and know him because he's like 97% success rate and totally amazing. And I'm happy to share it, but they have to qualify. I'm not going to send them everyone. Yeah. But if somebody's a thoroughbred and they're ready, it can make a huge difference. Well, we've written 40 patents. We've submitted 20. I think we have 8 or 9 already approved, and they're not under IBM and they're not under, Amazon. They're actually under my personal name, which there's only 11 million patents issued in America. That's not that many. And I now have, almost 10, which I call a patent portfolio. So in this patent portfolio, now I have an opportunity to make a legacy play out in the world. Now I have an opportunity to do things at a bigger level. But it wasn't until I was inspired through a living legacy that I started thinking, what can I do now? And what can I do to inspire other people, especially women, to say, I can do this too, right? If I'm doing it by myself, not backed by companies, anyone can do this. And all it is thinking different, but also taking action and making something valuable out of it. And then also asking a resource that's good at it to help. So those little pieces in place are just a little bit of an idea of how to build a legacy, but there's so many other ways. I mean, look at the legacy you're building right now. And the one that you jumped on with Think and Grow Rich, I mean, that legacy is beyond anyone's dreams, whatever anyone could imagine. If he knew right now how many people he was, in their mind today doing the work. I have my workbook with me from Think and Grow Rich, and I've done it 22 times, but I still start with a new workbook. And that means I'm thinking about the person who started that, and that's his legacy that you're continuing. Right. And it is one of my favorite books of all time because it's effective and everyone can read it and everyone can comply with it and everyone can have a shift in their thinking. And if it takes you 10 times reading it to have it, read it 10 times.
Yeah. It's
Period.
interesting, isn't it? You could read something, but on the 10th or the 11th time you read it, you realize you're a completely different person, and something that you've read 500 times before that, or that you've seen so many times, just jumps out of the page. And you're like, oh my
Absolutely.
God, what has happened to me that I'm now ready to receive this message?
And there's so many people that are in my group of 25 right now that are like, hey, I never thought to do this with a mastermind group before. I'm so glad I am. We're like, it's in the book, but now they're ready.
Yeah.
Now they were ready to share their desire with other people. I think up until now, they were practicing, but look, it's getting bigger just by being in the group. Their
Yeah.
desire and the results just by being in the mastermind group.
Mm.
It really is.
And last question before the rocket round. On your best day, what's an affirmation that you would write on a flashcard to show yourself on your worst day?
Today's the happiest day. And I love my life. I start my day that way every single day. My daughter and I do it together. She's written it on cards. She emails me when we're away all the time. Today's the happiest day and I love my life. And it is to start on a positive note. And it really does make a difference. And I feel like when you wake up, if you're starting on a positive note, your frequency is now going up and you have room for other things. Where if you start with, I'm tired, I don't want to go to work, I'm so this, I'm frustrated, you're already negative. You're not even like, start positive, please. Start with a way to feel the escalation of something good in your life, the frequency, the energy. It really is all energy. And so I think learning that, I started saying that with my daughter every day when she was about 5 years old. And on cue, she'll say it. I'll say, hey, Abby, and she'll go, today's the happiest day. But I will say when she was 5 and 6, it was funny because she would say, how do you know today's the happiest day? It hasn't started yet. And I'm like, Abby, you're planting the seed. You're designing your day. This is your choice. But she did challenge me on that many, many times from like 5 to 7. There were a lot of times she's like, well, I don't think it's going to be good today. I'm having a test or whatever it is. I'm like, hey, you might do better on your test, saying, I got this covered. Like, just be your own cheerleader.
Yeah.
But we had opportunities for those discussions. Again, how to put the things in her brain that help her be better and even better, right? So by having her challenge it, we were able to converse about it. So I was really glad she challenged me. But there were times I even thought, wow, today really doesn't feel like the happiest day. However, mindset does turn that around because we see what we're thinking, right? So all of a sudden I would see the proof of why today was great.
Yeah. One of the biggest shifts in my life occurred when I went from waking up expecting physical pain to be there, which leads to mental and emotional pain throughout the day, to breathing in gratitude for that. It manifested, it was stress that manifested in back pain. And I went and saw every specialist you could possibly imagine related to physical therapy and backs and everything else to find out that it was related to an accumulation of unresolved stress. Was a massive, probably the greatest realization I've ever had. And
It all starts here.
Exactly.
I know it sounds so trivial, but it's...
I immediately began breathing in gratitude every time that I felt the pain, and I realized I almost did an audit for a day, and I didn't understand how often I was accepting and premeditating the pain to occur, and it was able to literally in the space of about 24 hours left completely.
And it hasn't come back. And your brain is, because we're going to look at you and you're like doing great, but what's in your head is going to say whether you're really doing great or not.
For sure. So sometimes if I've had very little sleep and a very extremely stressful thing, the back pain can come back, like running a mastermind for a couple of days, for example.
It could.
But what's so weird is that I can experience that stress in my back and then go and deadlift 200 pounds and it's not a problem. So it's so related. I've tested it so much and it's very interesting.
Can I share something about stress that I learned recently? So I've been wearing an Aura ring for 5.5 years. I'm actually in the original investor group. So I love what they do because what gets measured gets improved. What gets measured and reported gets improved greatly, right? So I look at my Aura ring first thing every day. I just love it. It tells me so many things that I need to know. Well, they added a stress factor in there and I didn't really notice it. And I was in San Francisco last month, my hometown. I did all this work. Remember, I told you that one night till 11 o'clock I was working. It was all in San Francisco. And the next day I left for Maui and I had 16 days in Maui. And then I came to San Diego and here in Los Angeles. And now I realize that stress measurement is there. So what I do is 2 days ago on a break, I just started going through the stress and going backwards. And it was incredible to see the trends. Because when I was in San Francisco in my real life, there was almost not a day that was less than 2 hours stress. It was always 2 hours, 2:15, up to 4 hours. Here I am producing, I'm doing things, there's traffic, there's all these external factors. Do you know the minute I landed in Maui for the next 16 days, Every single day was zero stress. Every single day. Was I still doing work? Yes. Was I still having calls? Yes. Zoom calls? Yes. I still was driving my car. I still was going places. I still had appointments. Zero stress every day. I had one day, 15 minutes, and I could see it was a travel day. The whole time. I was in restorative. And my friend Ben Hardy, who wrote Personality Isn't Permanent, he said, your environment is the most important piece. Well, now I'm seeing it's really that true.
Yeah, to have the data on that's
it's
awesome.
really that true. And actually, when I was in your class the last couple of days, one of the things that was really interesting is we had a Reiki master there, right? Now, here she is basically teaching Reiki in a business class. Well, it was my birthday and she offered to come do Reiki for me as a gift, which was so generous and so sweet. And my friend Uli and I both said yes. And she came and she did about 50 minutes of Reiki time with us, right? When I looked at my aura ring later, the entire time was restorative energy. That is our goal, is restorative energy. That's when you're in flow state. And that just shows the power of energy work. I wouldn't know that. In my mind, I would tell myself that that was good for me. But now I'm seeing the proof that Maui is good for me, that Reiki is good for me, that paying attention to energy, that relaxing is good for me, that if I'm feeling stressed, it is bad for me. And how do I handle that? So now that I have the indicator, I actually can do something with it. Before I was just thinking it. Of course, cortisol and things like that would show up. But now I see our environment and the people we're with are so much more important. And now I can measure it. And the things that I'm doing right, I just want to keep repeating.
Let's now move to the Win the Day Rocket Round. 10 questions for some quick answers. You up for this one, Lee?
I am.
Number one, what quote inspires you the most?
What quote inspires me the most? When you look at things differently, then the things you look at change.
Number two, morning coffee or evening wine?
Ooh, how about morning wine?
Morning wine. It's like we're at Wizard Academy.
Wizard Academy, they do the red coffee. Isn't that morning wine?
Yes.
I would normally be, I'm not a big caffeine person. It doesn't really affect me, but I like the ritual of coffee. But I've learned matcha lately. And so that's been more my choice. So I will say wine.
Nice. Number three, what's one bit of advice you would give your 18-year-old self?
Just like Ursula says, let it go. Because I will tell you, the sooner you let that trauma go, the better you will be.
Number four, what book do you gift the most, or what contributed most to the mindset you have today?
Well, Think and Grow Rich is one of them, and I do give it often. The other one would be Sprint. And Sprint teaches companies how to make decisions in 5 days or less. And I have a lot of CEOs that get stuck in 6 week decision making, and I often give them that.
Nice. Number five, was there a vulnerability you once hid within that became your superpower?
Absolutely. When I was a kid, I remember sometimes not wanting to be on stage, not wanting to be, teaching, or I'd be a little nervous or shy. And now connecting with people and knowing people is my superpower.
The center of attention. Yeah.
It's mostly just about them, though. Yeah. Honestly, that's why I do PR, is I like shining the light on them.
Yeah. Number six, what's one thing you've learned about failure?
That is good for you. It makes you resilient. And now you know what not to do next time.
Number seven, if you could sit on a park bench and have a conversation with someone alive or dead, who would it be?
Da Vinci, of course. After doing that project with the Vatican, even more, I want to meet him.
Number eight, what tool or resource best helps you run your life or your business?
Other people. My mentors. It's absolutely my mentors.
Number nine, share one thing on your bucket list.
Oh, you know what? I'm in Maui all the time, and Oprah lives there. I wouldn't mind spending a day with Oprah at her house in Maui. That would be really fun. If anyone could do that for me, I would be really happy about that. I have some ideas for her again.
And last question, number 10, what's one thing you do to win the day?
Think about winning the day and actually start the day with today's the happiest day and I love my life. So thank you.
Love it. Well, there are a bunch of ways to connect with Lee Richter, and we'll link to all of these in the show notes. You can follow her on Instagram at GoAskLee, visit her website, goasklee.com, and check out her amazing TED Talk on YouTube. Again, all that and more will be linked in the show notes. Lee, what a pleasure. Thanks so much for coming on the show.
I absolutely enjoyed myself, and I can't wait to do it again.
Thanks for joining me on another episode of the Win the Day podcast. We want to hear your thoughts on what we covered today, so drop a comment on the YouTube version of this episode with your favorite takeaway, any questions you have, or what actions you'll be taking as a result of what was shared in this episode. And if you found value in the Win the Day podcast, leave a 5-star rating on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. You'll find a link to both of those in the show notes. It'll only take you a few seconds, and more ratings really helps other people discover the show so they can get the mindset upgrade they need, and we can bring more winners into the Win the Day movement. That's all for this episode. Get out there and win the day. Until next time, onwards and upwards, always.